some of the most misunderstood plants in the houseplanty world are Alocasias. Everybody struggles with them. Let's dive into it. Hi, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me, it's tropical houseplants. So yes, today I thought let's dive into the wonderful world that is Alocasias. And I'll start this off by saying that I don't think that these plants are actually difficult. I think they are massively misunderstood because a lot of people do the care that they find online for them, which is fair dues. A lot of people, that's how you get the care for most of your houseplants. And a lot of the care kind of seems reasonable. It makes sense that these things would need X, Y, and Z in order to be happy. But a lot of the times that care advice that you might find online tends to ignore how these plants actually grow in nature. And I think that is where some of the problems begin to arise. By the end of this video, I'm going to show you why your Alocasias keep collapsing even though they seem completely perfect and fine for the longest period of time, and all of a sudden, poof, what's wrong with you? What happened? And then also go into a bit more detail on why people will accidentally keep stressing out their Alocasias, and also something that's a bit more misunderstood when it comes to their watering needs. First, let's talk about the big obvious thing. So actually, in all fairness, let me... So whilst I'm waving plants around, this is an Alocasia silver dragon, a little pup from a corm that I got from the plant swap in London a while back. And interestingly, this was reverting. I don't know whether or not this is going to come up. If not, I'll see if I can add a picture. But this is a silver dragon Alocasia with the tiniest bit of variegation on it as well. And the person did tell me that there is some intermittent variegation. I don't think it's true variegation. It's that kind of like the pixels are misfiring on the leaf. And then we've got the Alocasia scalprum here. So I'll bring this in so you can kind of see this. This was struggling. And as I said, it's not just everybody else. It's me too with these plants. I sometimes forget some of the things that I've learned along the way. So yes, even I will forget the things that I've learned along the way about Alocasias and still make mistakes. Nobody is spared by the Alocasia hurting our feelings. So yes, the first thing I want to touch on is the fact that a lot of people will treat their Alocasias the same way that they will their philodendrons. And I will say this for everybody in the back as well, your Alocasia is not a philodendron. Do not expect it to grow like a philodendron. One more time. I know it sounds obvious. This is not a philodendron. So do not treat it like a philodendron. And don't expect it to react to certain stimuli and certain stresses like a philodendron would. I'm choosing a philodendron because a lot of people that probably have an Alocasia might also have a philodendron of some variety. Alocasias, for one, tend to be more cyclical growers. Anybody who has grown an Alocasia for a year will know that your plant will go through peaks and troughs. So you will get a lot more growth that's happening around the beginning, middle, and end of the growing season, so spring and summer. And then you will get a come up to dormancy and the reality of dormancy with Alocasias, and you'll come up to a kind of quieter, not an awful lot is happening autumn and winter time. You don't always get that with philodendrons, so don't expect your Alocasia to follow the same path. So with philodendrons, you might get a few leaves during those other times of the year. They might still be actively growing. This is different. And I probably don't need to say this more than once, but they are very dramatic to environmental changes, where other houseplants like a philodendron, like a monstera, I'm not going to include anthuriums into this kind of list, but a lot of our other houseplants might be adjustable to changes, or at least a lot more adaptable than an Alocasia would be. These guys tend to throw hissy fits, and they also don't handle root disturbance particularly well. Again, I will say this one more time for everybody that immediately goes to, I need to repot this Alocasia, it's having issues. They do not respond well to their roots being disturbed. Which again, let me just get your mind into how these plants are growing versus a lot of the other plants that we might be growing, especially the epiphytic plants. That's why I'm pointing towards some philodendrons here, versus a plant like an alocasia, which is terrestrial. It grows in the ground, it does not grow epiphytically, and it needs stability basically. So something that is growing epiphytically, again, I'm bringing up the philodendron example because it's easy, nooks and crannies, and it will get moved around. They're not the most stable plants always within their locations because of the way that they grow. And alocasia is like any other plant that you might be growing in the ground. Think of garden plants, think of anything like that. Think trees, think fruit trees that you might be growing in the ground. How many times are you going to be repotting that plant? And also, I'll take it a step further, if you are used to growing outdoors or in the gardens and all of these things, or even on a balcony, when it's something that you know is meant to be growing in the ground all the time, how many more kind of like pauses will you take before going, do I want to disturb its roots? These plants are not used to having a lot of jostling around their roots. It makes sense. They are not an epiphyte. They are something that grows terrestrially in the ground. When in nature would you ever find things that are growing directly in the ground and not epiphytically getting their roots disturbed on a frequent basis? It kind of makes sense. This is not something that this plant is expecting on a frequent basis. Thus, hissy fits. And the other thing as well that a lot of people need to start kind of clicking into place is they consume and replace their leaves very differently to what you might get with a philodendron. So think about that for a moment, because there's a lot of people out there that always kind of say, you know what, if your plant, any plant has got a yellow leaf and it's not something like root rot and it's just old leaves that are yellowing off. Some of my older leaves are doing the same thing very slowly now, which is why I know that they're sunsetting themselves. A lot of the times, and I agree, at least in my humblest of opinions, for my own collection. I'm not telling you to do the same if you don't for your collection, but I will leave some of those leaves on there as long as I possibly can, because a lot of the times the sugars are reabsorbed. This happens a lot with alocasia. So a lot of the times, even though it doesn't look great, leave those older kind of yellowing leaves on there, because there's a reaccumulation back into the main part of the plant of all of those kind of nutrients and chemicals that are within those old and dying leaves in order to help it for the other ones, which is why a lot of the times these plants, if they're not happy, they tend to feature very heavily in the one leaf club. So you've got an alocasia, it's got one leaf remaining, because potentially you might have had an older leaf yellowing off and you just removed it. I don't like it, it doesn't look nice. Step away from the scissors. Because sometimes if you've only got, say for instance, 2 leaves, and this corm, what it's growing from in the middle, needs those kind of elements to go back into it in order to have what is needed to push out a new leaf. Guess what you've just done? I don't like the leaf, I've got rid of it. It's just like, this plant is just like, okay, well, I knew that all of those kind of materials were coming back into me. I don't have them now. So we're starting from scratch again. Okay, I'm stressed now. I'm stressed. See how easy it is to stress an alocasia? So just bear that in mind. And also, it is one of those plants that you know as well as I do, when you get a plant and you've been growing it for years and you've had a couple of mistakes that may have lost leaves, not talking about older leaves, but mistakes that have lost some of the leaves, you might end up with a very tall plant with only like 1 or 2 leaves on there because you've lost them, and it doesn't replace it on the same level. Potentially with something like a philodendron, you won't always get the node reactivating where a leaf potentially has been removed, has had issues and is no longer there, but there is a chance because of that node for a new leaf to grow where the old one was left. It doesn't always happen, and it can be quite rare unless you are specifically kind of encouraging that with cuttings or partial cuttings. There are ways to encourage a node to activate. That doesn't happen with this. You lost a leaf, you've lost a leaf, it's gone bye-bye, no more. So you will have a gap within that growing canopy of this plant because that leaf is not getting replaced. There is no way for that leaf to get replaced. You might get pups, which is something you don't get with philodendrons. So you might get a bushier plant overall because there's multiple little plantlets that are coming up. That's different, but you will not be getting a new leaf reactivating from a node. I know a lot of people that have been growing alocasias for a while, they know this, but it's worth kind of saying sometimes. One of the realest and biggest problems with alocasias, so again, I'm bringing up the silver dragon, and hopefully it will focus. There is something with alocasias that people don't always talk about, which is stress stacking. So stress upon stress upon stress upon stress upon stress. You stack all the stresses on top of each other, and some other plants might be better at dealing with them. The alocasias will not. And they are less forgiving of this as well. So if you've got a little stress, it'll be fine. If there's another second little stress, it'll be fine. It's not happy. By the time you've added a third or fourth or fifth stressor on there, the plant's just like, nope, I'm done. Understandable. It's just like, I can only take so much. I'm gonna like go back down into myself, which makes sense. And a lot of people don't always think about it that way. When you are doing certain things or certain things are happening, that's when the stress stacking will kind of mount up. So let's list some stresses, and you can see what I mean by this. So for instance, not enough light, not enough water, too much water, repotting, coldness for when the seasons change, moving locations, like the plant's entire environment changes. Something that might have had a lot of humidity around it now no longer has humidity. Think winter and the heating cranking up. You can see there's a lot of things that will stack up in terms of the stresses that these plants will experience within your space. And by the way, just to be clear, because I know a lot of people love to say this, and understandably, they're just like, but you're growing in a conservatory, you've got more or less ideal conditions. No, some of these plants, both of these plants, grow in here. Both of them have had stresses stacked upon them. Nobody is exempt from these stresses. It's just being able to manage them. And I know before anybody else says this, it's just that I can't be bothered. Fine, but alocasias might not be for you then in that case. It's one of those, you kind of need to take the plant with the way that it is. Otherwise, for your own sanity, move on to something different potentially. And I know a lot of people have already moved on from alocasias, but there's also a lot of people that are just like, I really want these plants because they are so pretty, they are so unusual, they're so unique. And this is why I'm kind of bringing up like how many other plants look like a dragon scale. I mean, come on. And hopefully you can see where I'm going with this. The stress stacking. This is why a plant that was growing entirely fine all of a sudden declines into nothing. And briefly touching on the dormancy thing here is, because yes, some plants can go dormant in the winter. However, think about the winter. Think about all those little stresses that I've mentioned. Inconsistent watering, you don't adjust the watering early enough. Inconsistency with light. There's less daylight hours, especially if it's in a window. It gets drier because the heating comes on. You maybe panic at some point when you start seeing it struggle and you repot it thinking you're doing the right thing. It might be the soil that's wrong. Let's repot it. What have you just done? Either actively by repotting and adding an extra stress on there, or just by existing, just by things changing around it. You've stacked on so many stresses that the plants just like, nope, I'm done. I'm out of here. You see what I mean? Because again, we need to remember, we keep forgetting that a lot of these plants are coming from locations that are either on the equator or quite close to the equator. So stable daylight hours, stable temperatures, winter and summer doesn't change too much. You might get a wet and a dry season. And even in the dry season, anybody from these regions will tell you, it's don't think we go from monsoons to desert. It's appropriate to that region. So more rain or less rain, wet and dry seasons. Generally, that's what it means in those locations. So you can see that these plants are used to growing in very kind of stable-ish conditions. Think how unstable your home environment is by and large throughout the year. With me? I thought that might make sense. Another thing that a lot of people don't always talk about online is that your potting mix might be a bit too safe. And I'll expand on this because I've had this as well with these plants, is a lot of people will just go, I don't want to give it root rot, and it can get root rot really easily, and I'm usually happens in the winter. So I don't want to do this, and I want to give it as airy of a soil mix as I can. Which is me. Both of these plants are in an anthurium soil mix. Both doing okay now, less so in the winter as well. So it tells you something. So a lot of the times you need to keep into consideration where these plants are coming from. Yes, just because I'm growing these in a very light anthurium soil mix, which is more meant for true epiphytes versus terrestrial plants, which is what this is, it doesn't always necessarily mean that you should be doing the same thing. It depends on your conditions, obviously. So bear that in mind when it comes to the soil selection with this. Because, and I'll be honest with this plant as well, so now this is a net pot as well as an anthurium soil mix there. This is getting very close now to needing a cache pot. I bought it back because it had some rot that was happening in the winter, and I can see the roots starting to come through, and hopefully that might focus enough so you can see a couple of roots, and you might be able to see one down at the bottom there. It's starting to grow in. Very soon, what I'm gonna have to do with this plant, because obviously, at least at the time of filming this, I'm going towards the tail end of May. We're gonna get into the busy season, warm season. It will be busy because everything will need watering more frequently, and also apparently, I think, if I'm not mistaken from what I'm seeing online, we're about to have a super El Nino, which means we're gonna fry. Such fun. Also, if you weren't aware of that, check it online. You probably won't thank me, you might, but yeah, check it online and prepare yourselves, because apparently this summer and winter we're gonna experience a lot of extremes, so but yes, so with this, make sure that you're giving it the right type of soil. And sometimes you need that balance between hydration, because these can be very thirsty plants, especially in their active growing season. Again, remember I've said this until I'm blue in the face. On my channel, these plants generally will be growing near waterways, rivers, lakes, all of these things. Imagine how moist that soil is. Granted, it's probably quite airy as well. Also, I don't know if people always make the connection, growing in a pot will stay wetter for a lot longer versus growing directly in the ground. There's this different care that you need to give to your plants for that reason. So don't always just take, oh, this is almost a marginal plant near waterways, I need to have this as sapping wet all the time. No, because this still needs to dry out. In nature, when it's in the ground, the soil reacts in a very different way to when it is in a pot, especially when it comes to moisture, because naturally the water will trickle down further down within the soil levels, and it won't always have, unless it's in very bad soil, which probably means that this plant won't be growing, very dense soil, it will kind of slough away, so you won't get that issue that's happening when you have it in a pot. So it is a fine balance. I'm not gonna lie, it is a fine balance. But it is one of those things with Alocasias that it will click at some point and just go, okay, I think I've got it now. I think I've got it. And the moment that you have it, you're done. You've locked in. It doesn't mean you can't lose it. I've lost it as well because I was so distracted with growing everything else. These plants, I find, take a tiny bit more of my mental focus in order to keep them going and get to that level where I kind of know exactly what I'm doing. And then for me, they tend to be plug and play. As long as I adjust things throughout the year, that's fine. But it does take a while to get there, and you can forget it. As I said, I'm still okay with the larger Alocasias. The smaller dual Alocasias tend to be a bit more challenging. So you need to remember as well, with the soil, it's the time when you might get, because of watering inconsistencies, because you've given it all the air, so that's fine, it's not going to rot out, but is it getting enough moisture at that point? That's when you'll get leaf die-off. That's when you'll get potentially the dormancy in the winter, because if it's not getting enough water, even if it's getting the right conditions for everything else, you're still stressing the plant out. See previous point about stacking of the stresses. But it is one of those things that you kind of need to be adjusting with this plant in order to kind of get the soil media just right. I'm being inherently lazy by just using an anthurium soil mix on here. And interestingly, my best success with a lot of my anthuriums was when I was doing my own mixes. I know people have asked for what my kind of DIY mix is and what I'm comfortable with. I am coming up to that video soon. The problem is I need to get most of those components because I've been lazy for too many years and I keep getting ready-made mixes, which means that I don't always have the components that I need for my DIY mixture because I don't make it that often anymore at hand. So as soon as I've got all the materials, that video is coming, do not worry. And remember with your alocasias are telling you things before they kind of get out of control. So things like the petioles softening up, so slightly floppier leaves, or potentially if you've got a clear pot, potentially looking at loss of roots, or, and this is another big one, you might get curling of the leaves. How many of you, tell me down below, have started to have alocasias where their leaves start going in really weird angles and positions? And how many of you have had that in the past and eventually you ended up either losing that plant or it getting knocked down entirely and you did not make that connection that it's just like, the plant was trying to tell me things. I don't know what to listen for, so I missed it. Now you know. Next time, listen, watch, see how the leaves are reacting, especially if it's one, fine, you can kind of just keep an eye on it. But if you start seeing a lot of the leaves doing the same thing, something's happening, pay attention. Obviously things like stalled growth, small leaves, this all makes sense, but this is something that we're used to seeing from other plants. Generally speaking, if you get stalled growth and it's not a seasonal thing that you're worried about with the dormancy, it is one of those things that you're just like, oh, we're in the summer, everything else is growing, all my other allocations are growing, why are you stalled all of a sudden? Or, like, your leaves are getting bigger every time, why are they getting smaller now? What's happened? It's a good indicator for you to check things out without adding stress to the plant. And I'm coming into that in just a moment, because you're just like, well, how am I going to do that if I can't, like, repot, or if I can't, like... I'm coming to it, don't worry. But what actually changed my success with alocasias, both now when things are starting to pick up again and they're doing okay and it's not just the spring and summer, and also with the big alocasias that I was doing. So I'm not going to tell you the same thing that everybody else on the internet is saying, which is buy a humidifier. No, that's a lazy bit of advice. Yes, the humidity will help with most tropical plants, because guess what? There's a lot of humidity where they're growing. Shocker. But with alocasias specifically, consistency is key, especially during stable seasons. So in the spring and summer, when you know that things are going to be a bit more stable, keep it consistent. This is not the time to be messing with things. Absolutely not. Yes, if you want to repot, this is a better time to do it. Yes, these are the times where you will do one action. Usually at the beginning or middle of the season, don't do it towards the end, because if you do it at the end of the summer, you might as well do it in autumn at that point. The plant doesn't have enough time to recover from that one stress. One. This is another interesting one that people don't always talk about. And this might be a bit of a game changer for a few people. Regardless of your conditions, are you making sure that the root mass and the root zone is staying warm in the winter? Specifically, I'm not talking about the summer, because most of these plants, they get the warmth during that summer months. And I've got a plant upstairs that is struggling in my bathroom, which is an alocasia, and is getting all the lights. It's done the leaf curl thing, and I can see through that it's a pregnant leaf that it's going to come out through. It's the last leaf on that plant, so it's been struggling for a while. I've got it in a clear pot, so I can see there's a whole bunch of lovely new healthy roots, but that leaf has still not pushed through. Guess what made it push through, which most people don't think about? Because again, think about it. This is now spring and summer here as well. I had the root mass, so the leaves were getting loads of light coming in from the window, but this was in a large cache pot. Guess what was happening to the soil level in that bathroom? It was never getting warm enough. Guess what made a huge difference? And I'm not going to tell you to use a heat mat. You can if you wanted to for the winter. Just be careful with heat mats. I've talked about them entirely on different videos. I'll see if I can find the video and add it at the top there as a link. But close to a window, if you're getting enough sun on the pot, guess what that sun is doing to this region? Yep, it's warming it up. Makes a big, big difference. Big, big difference. The other big thing for me was also understanding the active growth seasons. I am not going to sit there and go into deep, dark mourning if my Alocasia just looks the same throughout winter. To me, that is a win. It's not a fail. I do not need this plant to be actively growing in the winter. I know this is kind of bleak. If my Alocasia goes into winter looking like this and comes out of winter into spring, or autumn and winter, and comes out of autumn and winter looking the same, and the roots are still healthy and nothing has changed and it is just retained its status quo, for me, that is a huge win. Do not, and I'm coming back to the first point, do not expect your Alocasia to respond to certain changes like your philodendron would. This is fine. If that's all you've managed to achieve, that is really good. Really, really good, especially considering how many issues with Alocasias start during the colder and darker autumn and winter months. And one of the biggest ones, don't panic, don't lose your head when you get some leaf loss. Sometimes it's fine. Leave the leaves on there for the plant to reabsorb the nutrients. Please do. I know it might not look great. Put another plant in front of it to hide a leaf that might be yellowing. It's fine. Trust me, your plant will thank you for it. But let's do a quick final thoughts. So remember what I said. They are not a philodendron. Do not, if you can, stack stressors on top of each other with these plants. They will not do well with them. Remember that your soil matters. Maybe you're being a bit too careful. Visualize, see what's happening, and see if you need to make an adjustment. One adjustment, and then the things that you will learn along the way, the same way that I did. Consistency is key, especially when it's normally kind of warmish weather, spring and summer. Do not do the stresses that I was talking about before, making sure that if the status quo stays the same even in the winter and these plants don't change, you are on a winning streak. You're going into the spring and summer that is following with your head up high and going, I'm going in with the best possible chance of survival with this one. I'm not saying, by the way, that you can't get an Alocasia to actively grow in the winter. I've done that several times. But by and large, don't go in expecting that. That is the exception. It is not the rule. Exception, not the rule. I said it twice. There's a good reason why I said it twice. The funny thing is, when you stop and appreciate and understand how and why Alocasias are behaving a certain way, they kind of stop becoming that concept of difficult in your brain. Dramatic? Yes, obviously. Annoying? Sometimes. But by no means impossible. They are great, great plants. There's a lot of people that are still huge fans of these. Don't give up on them. Try making some of these adjustments. As I said, dramatics. I know a lot of people kind of pile on to the Calatheas and just go that they are drama queens, and I think people have started to realize sometimes the Alocasias are kind of on the same category. And interestingly enough, I've had less issues from Calatheas than I've had from Alocasias. Might surprise some people, but it's true. So yes. Let me know your thoughts down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Have you experienced something different? Did you learn something different from what I was saying? Do share it all down below. My videos are always meant for the community by and large. I want them to be a discussion ground down below so you can all have those conversations. I love seeing you all interact. So yeah, but yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.